Mr. Otter Studio. Today I'm going to be showing you how to paint an orchid using watercolor. These are the supplies that you're going to need. You're going to need some watercolors, and I'm just using this Praying 8-color set that I got at a grocery store by my house. You need a pencil to sketch your design with, some watercolor paper. I'm using this Orchid paper today, and I would just grab a scratch piece of watercolor paper to test out your colors on. Also, I'm using these 3 different brushes. So I have a small round, it's a number 2, just a medium round brush, and then about a 1/2 inch flat brush. If you want to, you can use some masking tape to tape a border. Always have a paper towel and a cup of water. This is a beginning watercolor lesson. Typically when I teach how to paint a flower, we just paint one flower. But with these orchids, we're going to be painting 7 different orchids on a branch. What we're going to be doing is just going over the basic anatomy or parts of an orchid, and then we're going to draw it together on your watercolor paper, and then we will paint it. I'm going to be drawing kind of dark when I do my sketch just so you can see it, but when you draw it on your watercolor paper, draw it pretty light. I'm just going to go over the basic parts of an orchid. So there's almost 2 elephant ears. And sometimes they're round, sometimes they're pointed. There's a lot of different orchids. This is just the one that we're drawing. These look like petals, but they're called sepals. So there's 3, and they kind of go in a triangle. There's one at the top, one that comes in from the side, and one that comes over here. And then in the middle, we kind of have this little pouch. I'm gonna draw a circle and then we'll fill it in with the pieces. So just go ahead and draw a circle in there. There's 2 petals, they look like petals, they're probably not really petals, on the edges. 2 smiley faces on the edges like this. And these actually bend around and come back in like that. And then underneath, there's this petal that comes below and kind of makes like a little mountain or M in the middle, and then comes back up into the center. And then in the middle, we have the pollen. It's almost like an upside down, or I guess a right side up teardrop. So we have 2 petals, and then we have 3 of these sepals, and then we're just gonna call this the pouch. You are going to be doing this on your watercolor paper, and I would recommend probably taping up the edges of your watercolor paper first. Once you get your edges taped up, if this is the middle part of your paper, the branch is going to start a little bit over from that. Now this comes up at an angle, and then it comes over just a little bit, almost like the roof of a house, but not quite as slanted, and then it comes over again, and then it comes up again. Up at an angle, over a little bit more, over again, it's bending, and then it's just bending up at the end. Now there's going to be little branches that are coming off of the side of this. There's going to be one there, one that's going to be coming up here, one that comes off at this bend, and one that drops down from this bend. So those are the basic parts of the branch. I'm just going to color it in so you can see it. You do not color it in, draw it very, very lightly. Now we have 6 distinct flowers that we're going to be drawing. First, we're just going to be drawing some circles where they're going to be. So there's going to be one right here, and it comes, the bottom of it meets up with the bottom of this branch. Then there's one that comes a little bit behind that one right here. And then there's one floating at the very top. Then there's a circle here that's just a small bud. There is one that's here, but we're going to make it an oval shape. Then there is another egg shape right here. And then the very last one is kind of attached to this one, and we're just going to draw another kind of egg shape right at the end. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 orchids that we're going to be drawing. Everyone can draw it up to this point. When we start putting the petals on, that's when it might get a little bit tricky for some of you, but if you'll just have patience and hang on with me, I will help you draw this. So in this first one, let's start by drawing the elephant ears. Let's just say this is the middle of that circle, okay? So I'm going to start my elephant ear right in there, and here we're going to come up, make our elephant ear. It's going to curve around, and then come back into the center. And remember, I'm drawing really dark so you can see it, but you should not be drawing this dark. This next one comes up, over, and almost makes like a square, and then comes back into the middle. And then we have this petal up here. We can see the corner of this one, this petal The pouch on this one is a little bit lower than on the other one. So you can draw the circle if you want, because we're going to use the sides of the circle to draw this first petal. And then we're going to draw the second. And then the little petal that comes underneath this thing, dragon tongue, that is going to come up and over this way. And then we just have the pollen in the middle like that. I'm going to erase the circle lines just so you can see it a little bit more clearly. So we've drawn one. I know we can do the rest. So this one, we're going to start, here is the middle. So the middle of this one's a little bit over, and we're going to start by drawing that elephant ear. It's going to come up, and this one's going to bend over and come down and back in. The next one is going to come up. We can't really see this side of it, but we're going to just draw it in anyway. We don't want it to come too much lower than that one. Now we're going to draw the sepal, or this other petal. I'm just going to call it a petal because it's easier for me. And then we're going to draw this bottom petal. We can't really see this one too much over here. So this one is overlapping or coming in front of this flower down here. And then we're going to draw our circle in here for the pouch. I guess inside the pouch is like another set of elephant ears. This one just looks like a little bean or a hot dog. And then the bottom of this one comes to the side as well, that little dragon tongue, and then we're just gonna draw the little pollen to erase that circle so you can see it a little bit better. 5 more to go. All right, now this one is kind of the biggest, proudest one of all. This one is in front of that one. So let's start by drawing our elephant ears, and I'm gonna draw the elephant ear that comes this way first. So the middle is right here, so I'm just gonna come a little over from the middle and draw my first elephant ear. Over and around, and I'm going to cut it off right there. I'm going to draw the next one. It's kind of bending in, and this one has a little bit of a point and drops down and in. Then I'm going to draw the sepal up. This one comes nice and tall and proud, and then the bottom of it would come over that way. This is actually in front, so I'm not drawing too dark right there. And then we can see part of this petal. Then let's go ahead and draw a circle in right here. And then we're going to break it apart, so we're going to put like a C here, the letter C, and then let's get another hot dog over here, put the pollen in the middle, and then let's go ahead and draw that dragon tongue over like that. And when I say dragon tongue, I'm just draw the letter U and then hook it back to the middle with 2 curved lines, if that's easy for you. When I say dragon tongue, that's what I'm talking about. Let's draw this one, since it's the most simple. It's just a oval. And in the oval, it's kind of broken up, so there's one line coming down from there, one line coming down from here, kind of breaking apart these petals. We only have 3 left. These ones are facing the side. Instead of these elephant ears, there's going to be a lot of oval petals. Okay, let's start with this one that's hiding back here. If you look at this branch, it kind of bends over, holding the weight of this one up. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna draw just an oval that comes straight up through our stem. And it's actually behind it. That's why I erased those lines. And then we're going to draw an oval. Just draw a slide down or a loop and then come right back up into the middle. And then you're going to do the same thing, but you're going to tuck this one behind it like that. And then the top petal starts from the middle, comes up through this branch, flattens out, and then comes back down into the middle. And then we're just going to draw a dragon tongue thing coming right out from the middle of that one. Now I'm going to erase this so you can tell that this petal is behind the branch, not in front of it. There is a branch we need to draw in that comes down and over to this flower right here. So at the bottom of your circle or your flower bud, just draw a little upside down rainbow, and that is going to connect to that other flower. Let's draw an oval that comes straight up and down, and we're going to draw a bigger one that's going to come up and through this flower up to the top and down. And there's going to be another one that's in front of it right here. So these are just ovals that I'm drawing. And then there's a big petal that's going to come over, but it's going to be behind this petal, but let's just go ahead and draw it in anyway. It would come in like that if we could see it. And then we have our little dragon tongue coming back into the middle, and we have a circle petal coming back in like that. So this one is confusing. I'll draw it right here so you can see it a little bit better. Basically what we have going on, we have the branch that's coming over to it, we have the little petal going down, one big one coming up. This just looks like a cursive F, and then there's another angle coming down, a big elephant ear coming from the side, and then a dragon tongue that actually should be underneath this one. I'll just make that one a little bit smaller. If that one doesn't make sense and you're having a hard time drawing it, just draw one that looks like this. It's the basic idea. Now let's go ahead and draw this one in. So this one's facing the side, but the middle would be about right here. So we are going to draw our elephant ears in once again. Let's draw the back one first. This one actually looks, instead of an elephant ear, it looks like a butterfly wing. And then you have this one, just a little bit bigger. And then the circle in the middle shifts to the right. So go ahead and just draw an oval and then draw another oval coming out of it that way. And this one has, this middle piece is actually going back. And then it looks like one of the pieces is coming this way. And then we have the dragon tongue that's coming right out of the center pouch. So this one we really can only see 1, 2, 3, 4 of the main petals, and I just added a little bit of 5 right in there. If you have any trouble drawing these, just go back, you can zoom in, draw this on your watercolor paper really, really lightly, and then we're gonna paint it in. This is how to tape your edges. If you've never done it before, I'm just using masking tape or painter's tape. This creates a nice natural border. You do not have to do this. Also, when you're doing the taped border, sometimes I'll just tape it right to my table. What I'm going to do really quickly is just show you the colors that we're going to be using. So for the flower, we're going to be using red with a little bit of purple mixed with it. So this will be the color of our orchids. Not too purple. Oh, here's it with a little bit more red. A little better. Now for the background, I think we're going to be using a turquoise jade, a nice cool blue like that. So we'll use that for the background, that color for our flowers, and then I think we'll just go ahead and use brown mixed with purple for the stem. Let's see, something like that. So now that you've seen the colors we're going to be using, and I'm actually going to keep them in these sections in my palette. If you have a plate, you can also mix your paints like that in sections. We're going to start light to dark, so let's make a light fuchsia or pink, purpley orchid color. And we need enough to paint each of these flowers with it because we're going to paint them with the lighter color very first. So that's pretty dark, so let's add more water to it. Here's a technique that you can use once we paint the darks on. We can dry our brush off on our paper towel and soak up the light parts, or we can paint around the light part and then use our kind of wet brush to just blend it a little bit in. You can just soften your edges up that way. The center of our orchids is where the white is gonna be here. Go ahead and start painting that area in. Start with the elephant ears. And I paint left to right since I'm right-handed. If you're left-handed, maybe you want to start on the left side so you don't drag the paint across. Okay, so I'm going to start at the edges of the elephant ear and bring it in till it gets kind of close to the middle. And when it gets close to the middle, I'm just going to dip my brush in the water, pat it off a little bit, and then just make a nice soft edge right there. If you notice, I'll dip it in this paint and then I'll usually dry it off a little bit. Sometimes there's too much paint on your brush in it. Kind of makes it hard. So I'm painting around the elephant ears, and then as soon as I get near the middle, I'm rinsing my brush off, blotting it, and then I'm just going along that edge. So I want to keep that nice and light in the middle. And I'll do the same thing with this petal that's in the back. Get it close to the middle, dry my brush off, and then just feather it into the middle. These petals right here don't really have white on them, so I'm okay to just paint them with a pure color. Also, our dragon tongue part and this middle piece. The only thing you shouldn't really paint over is where the pollen is in the center of the flower. So I'm not gonna paint this little part that's shooting up. Let's go to our next one up here. So I'm gonna paint this elephant ear in. Once I start to get near the middle, I'm gonna rinse my brush off, touch it to the paper, and just make it a little bit lighter in the center of my flower. So we're kind of just painting the petals pink right now and making sure when we get near the middle, we lighten it up a lot because it's almost white. Right here, I want to just get my brush and smooth that line. Now let's come up to our big petal. Make sure I have enough paint on my brush. I'm going to go ahead and paint all of these in and then feather the middle. So I'm rinsing my brush off and drying it, and then I'm just going around those edges to make a nice gradual, I want it to lighten up gradually. I don't want it to all of a sudden be dark and light. Then I'm going to paint these two little side petals And then underneath where the pollen is, the dragon's tongue, and then my other, forgot about a little petal back here. This one gets lighter right in this corner, so I'm just going to paint around that edge and then get my brush wet, dry it off, and just kind of go around the edges of those. We can't see the inside of this one, so I'm just going to paint in the petals. So your petals might look a little bit different than mine, and that is okay. When you're painting these petals, make sure you're identifying, you know, this is a vine, this is a petal, so you don't accidentally paint the wrong thing. I'm going to start with this one. We can't see the inside of this one either, so don't need to worry about the gradiated wash or making it lighter in the center. We're just going to paint it all with the light color we've chosen for our petals. This one does have light part in the center, so I'm going to paint around it first. Okay, then I'm going to get my brush wet, dry it off, and then just kind of go around the edges here. And now we're just going to slowly get darker until we get to the darkest parts. Let's just add in the next levels of color, and it's going to be around the edges of our petals. So I'm just going to mix it right here. And if you have more of the color we used before left, you could actually just use that same petal and just add a little bit more paint to it. So remember, we're using red with a little bit of violet. So I've tested my color. Now what I'm going to be doing is glazing over this layer, and I still don't want to get the middle part of these orchids too dark. Most of these petals have a darker one that's behind, so I'm going to paint that in first. Use the color you just mixed up, and we're going to be painting the sepals. And what we want to do is, most of them are a little bit more shaded towards the center of the orchid. So I'm going to start up here. The whole thing is going to be pretty dark, but we're going to kind of paint out towards the edge with this color. And I'm trying to not paint over my little dragon tongue thing that I did there. This will start to define our petals and separate them from each other. So now we're reaching a point where I need it to start getting lighter right here. So I'm going to dip my paintbrush in the water and dry it off really well. I don't want to paint a ton of water over this, or else it could erase my nice color that I have underneath. I just want to soften that edge up a little bit. So let's paint the sepals, and then we'll paint the petals. Okay, now when we get to some of these, it's a little bit harder to tell where the sepals are, but I'm going to paint this orchid right here. Let's see. Oh, that's a space, I think. So here is the first one. And let's go ahead and add it in here. And this one's pretty dark all the way inside of this. This whole petal is actually dark. And then on this one, I'm just painting kind of like a nice shaded stripe, but I do not want it to look like a stripe because it's not really a shadow. So I'm lightening that edge up, and then I'm going to paint these in a little bit darker. And this one a little bit dark on the edge, and then a little bit lighter on the inside because I don't want it to blend too much with this petal right here. Let's come up to this one, and the sepal on this one is right here. And then we can see this one right here. And this one will get lighter. So rinse your brush off, blot it, and then just take that line down and in. Okay, now let's paint the center pouch parts. These ones are pretty simple, and they're dark and a little bit lighter towards the top. So I'm talking about these little pods that are in the center. So we're gonna start at the bottom and on the edge and go like this. And then, so again, I'm starting at the bottom of the pouch and kind of coming up to the top. And then I'm going to lighten the edges. So the bottom part is shaded, and it gets a little bit lighter as it gets towards the top. You can kind of just leave those ones alone, but this one is dark, really dark along this edge. Then it lightens up around the back. And then this one's pretty dark as well. It's actually going to get a lot darker. Most of these dragon tongues are really dark, except for this one's just a little bit lighter on the edge. So I'm just going to go ahead and get this color a little bit darker. Just making it darker by adding more color. So I'm just gonna go ahead and paint this, we'll call it the dragon tongue. Okay, so I'm just gonna soften up some of the edges on these little ones right here. Now I need to work a little bit on these petals right here. They're not as dark as the ones behind them, but they have some veins coming through them, and most of them are a little bit darker around the top edges. So what I'm gonna do is add a lot of water to this. I don't want it to be as dark as it was when I was painting before. We're going to come around the top edge of these, kind of along the outer edge right here. And then I'm gonna dip my paintbrush in my water, blot it off, and smooth it out. And when you smooth it out, you actually can start to smooth it out by bringing lines into the middle of your orchid. Let's try that again on this petal right here. Paint around the outside edge, get your brush wet, blot it off, come around this, and then start to just bring those lines into the middle, like that. It's gonna give it a little bit of texture. So come around the outside edge, rinse your brush off, blot it off, come along the edge. That one needed to be rinsed a little bit more. And then you can just feather it in with your brush into the center. So go around the edge and then bring it in. Now let's skip over to this one. We're going on the outside edge. Off our brush and blotting it, smoothing it, and bringing a few little creases in. Okay, now let's do the same thing on this petal right here. It's actually more shaded towards the center right here. So I'm just gonna add the dark part there towards the middle, and then I'm gonna fade it and bring the lines out like that. Let's add a little bit of shading on this little pod. We're gonna start at the bottom. You go around this edge, blot your brush off, and bring those lines up. So now what we want to do is add the very darkest shadows to our flowers. We needed to make our petal extra dark and add a bunch of color to it. So look how dark that is compared to our other colors. So now I'm going to take this nice color that I have here, and I'm going to paint the darkest areas. And I'm going to be using the technique that we used before and kind of coming along the edge and softening some things up here. Where I can see this is right in here. So you notice I'm just painting the top of this petal, then I'm going to rinse my brush off, come along the edge, and then I'm going to do the same thing we did before, except I'm going to bring it out like that. So I'm making a little bit of texture on that petal just by bringing those lines out. This bottom petal has shading along the side right here. So this is where we're going to drop our shadow in. And then we're going to rinse our brush off, blot it, come along the edge, and then just pull a few lines out of it as well. And there's a little bit of a shadow inside of this right here. Okay, now notice how I use my brush to kind of soften that up. And then there's going to be some more shading and shadows in here as well. Let's see, bring the darkest part along this edge and along the bottom of this one. And then let's come up to our next one up here. And this one, it has the shadow again right in here underneath. So each time I'm just rinsing my brush off, going along the edge, and then I'm going to fan it out. So there's going to be a little bit of a shadow on this edge right here. I'll just go along the edge, add some texture in there. And then this one has much more of a shadow on the top of it right in here. It kind of just comes out of this center part. So definitely need to darken this area up here and also the bottom of this one. Now we'll come up to our top orchid. So this petal is pretty dark back here. And then this one is too. and then we have that same shadow that's coming up out of the middle of this one. These ones have lines as well. And in the center, this part is of course darker. But this one kind of gets lighter in the middle. Just gonna do like a U shape. And then paint along the edges of that one. And since I made that so dark, I think I need to make it a little bit darker right here. Now on this one, we actually are going to use our darker color to define the edges of this. And it is pretty dark right here. And I'm going to be fading this one out in lines. Okay, now let's get some of the shadows on these petals down here. This one has a nice shadow from the petal in front of it, right on the edge. And then we have a little bit of a shadow on the back and in the middle. This one, I'm just gonna make it pretty dark on the inside, the whole thing. I'm just gonna add, let's see, a little bit along the back side of that one. Now let's add some of the shading to this last one. So it's dark next to the petal, just like the other ones were. So let's do this one first. It's all dark. And then this one has a little light edge right next to that one to separate them. So I'm going to leave a little bit of a light area right there. And then just add that little gradual part right there. I think we need to add a few more veins and creases on our petals. So we want to get a really, really light color to do that with. So before you paint on your paper, make sure you dry it off. So I'm going to dip in the paint, dry it off on my paper towel. Also, you can spread apart your brush like this and just kind of try to scratch some of those in. Kind of painting whiskers, I guess you could say, coming into the center. Okay, so now we have some nice texture. We have some shadows on our orchids. Now let's paint in the center part where the pollen is. This is bright, bright yellow. So I'm just going to be painting this whole entire shape. So this was that little upside down teardrop shape that we had in there. While that's drying, let's go ahead and put this fuchsia color that we were using before on some of our branches. So I can especially see some on this one. So I'm going to just paint a little on and then do the same thing we did on the petals and just lighten it up next to it with water. So I'm going to do the same thing to, let's see, this stem right here. Kind of starts out actually pink and then it fades. And this one has a little fuchsia on it too, so just paint that in. Let's paint our stem. We're going to be using brown and violet, and we'll go ahead and paint the darker parts and then kind of fade it into a yellowy kind of brown. So let's make that color so it's ready for us. I'm just gonna add it right here. It just goes into like this yellow brown color. So I just added a little bit of yellow to this brown purple color that we already made. So I'm gonna start at the bottom and avoid scrubbing your paper. This should be pretty flat and really dark. I'm just gonna paint the really dark parts first. Okay, now if you make a mistake like I just did, just grab a paper towel and just kind of pick up that paint that got on that petal. Okay, now this is where these are gonna start to fade. I'm gonna bend this down, rinse our brush off, and then we're gonna dip right in that brown, or even we could have just added some yellow to our brush and just paint right next to it. Dip it in the water, fade it up into the fuchsia color. We'll do it again on this one so you can watch if that didn't make sense to you. So we started with brown. Dipped our brown in yellow and just painted right next to it. Then dipped our brush in the water, blotted it off, and just faded it right up into the fuchsia color. Okay, we're gonna do the same thing in here. Okay, now the middle of these ones should be dry, so let's put a little details into it. So we're gonna need this to be really dark. So just test it out on this. That's dark enough. Okay, now on this center piece, there's kind of some little lines that are coming out from it, so they're really fine. So I'm just putting some dots on the middle part and a few lines up onto that pouch. And there is some spots up here too, but they would be lighter, so. Okay, so we've got some of those details in. Make sure this part is dry before you paint the background. That's going to be the next step, and that is the last step. You can do the background any color you want. I just chose like a turquoise jade color because I like it. Only thing you do have to do is mix up a ton of it because we're covering all of this area, and you do not want to have to stop and remix and try to blend everything back together. So let's go ahead and mix up our background color. And when I say mix up a lot, I mean mix up a ton. Let's get some blue in there, and you'll see. It's a lot of paint to change colors, but we will do it. The one thing I really love about this watercolor set is if I run out of blue, which I do all the time, I have an extra blue that I can just take out and pop it in. I don't have to buy a whole new paint set. Okay, now I'm gonna add a little bit of green. So that's a nicer jade color. So let's just maybe paint with that. I'd prefer it was darker, but that's okay. All right, let's get started. So we are going to be painting from left to right. Again, if you are left-handed, I'd probably paint from right to left. Make sure you have your paintbrushes ready because we do not want to stop when we're doing this. Also, make sure you don't scrub your background. You can see how this brush is soaking up a ton of paint. Okay, make sure your edges are sealed. Here we go. Okay, now in here, I'm gonna just stop really quickly, grab my small brush, and drop that in, because that's just a little bit too small for my large brush to get into. Okay. And there we have it, so I'm just gonna let this dry. Okay, so mine's pretty much dry. Just be careful when you take the tape off. You might have some wet paint on it that will drip onto your painting. So sometimes I just like to dry that off a little bit. And there you have it, how to paint orchids using watercolor. So last thing you want to do is sign it. You can sign it under here to the right, whatever. I just put my initials and the year. And you're finished. So I hope this tutorial was helpful. Have a great day, and we will see you around on YouTube. Whoever requested this, thank you. I had a lot of fun painting it.